Hi, I'm Diane Hullett, and welcome to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. Today, as my guest, I've got an author who's got a really unusual and beautiful book that I can't wait to share with you. So, welcome, Jennifer O'Brien.
Thank you, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's really neat. We sort of found each other on Instagram, which is one of those great kind of places where you can run into people who are kind of thinking along the same lines about these end of life issues. And your name kept popping up, and your handle on Instagram is Hospice Doctor's Widow. And I was very intrigued by that. Say a little bit about how you came to that name, and then we'll get into your book.
Yeah, sure. I don't know how I came to that name, except that it just came when I was I had finished up the journal, and it looked like I needed to try to get it published. That's another story, but and so I needed a title for it, and I really liked the sort of cadence to the Hospice Doctor's Widow, a journal. And I'm not 100% sure if I had it to do all over again, if I would name it that. I do like the sound of it, but people are very confused as to what it is.
Right,
Um,
right. It's
yeah.
interesting how much a name these days really it is really powerful. Well, I'll hold it up for anybody who's watching the video because we were just talking about how we thought we'd put this up on YouTube. So the book is called The Hospice Doctor's Widow, a Journal. And when I ordered it, I was so delighted because it's an oversized book. You know, you kind of expect it to be just a normal paperback kind of thing. And it's really an oversized, almost more like a coffee table book is a funny way to put it. And what Jennifer has done is this incredible combination of her experience of her husband's dying and her work as an artist and put it together in this collagey journal kind of way that gives you both the facts of what was happening in their lives, but also so profoundly the feelings of what was happening. So I was just smitten the minute I opened the book because of that combination. So, it's like I want to ask you, like, tell us about your art, your husband, and the creation of this book. It's like this one giant question. So, I don't know where you want to begin. I mean, in some ways, it helps to lay a little groundwork about your husband and what his work was, because that's such a piece. So,
Yeah, huge piece, huge
start
piece.
wherever you
I would
wish.
love to start with talking about my husband. His name was Bob Lemberg. He had been a plastic and reconstructive surgeon for a long time, long before I met him, but a neck injury meant that he could no longer operate without excruciating pain. And so he decided to retrain in hospice and palliative medicine. And I met him, he was a couple years into it, absolutely loving it. It was important when I met him that what he did was so important to me because I had already lost my only sibling and my mother, and I knew how important the work that he did was is. And so yeah, and besides he was super cute and funny and all that good stuff that makes your heart go pitter patter. And so we fell crazy in love. And yeah, that's a big, and I'm a self-taught artist. That's my, what I sort of do for my peace of mind and on the side. And I'm in healthcare administration otherwise. And so that after we'd been married a few years, he was on faculty at our med center here in Little Rock. He found a couple of lumps on the left side of his neck. And then after some diagnostics, we learned it was a stage 4, already metastatic to his thoracic spine and so forth. And neither of us had children. So I was his caregiver. And doctors don't always make the best patients. We had certain struggles with that. But we also had some advantages, not the least of which was the wisdom that, he would impart on his patients and their families. And we had talked about for years. And so that wisdom now we were turning on ourselves. And I started doing these digital collages on the side. I don't even know if Bob ever knew I was doing a journal. I transitioned at that point from analog collage to digital collage, which was quite a uphill battle, but worth it. And then, yeah, I kept this journal. I documented my thoughts and feelings and his wisdom, as I said, and a lot of it first is a collage, and then the note, of my thought or feeling or experience kind of gets written on top of the collage layers. And so, yeah, so it was never intended to be a book. It was purely for my own self-care. He lived for 22 months after his diagnosis. We thoroughly thoroughly prepared for his death and my survivorship. And my hypothesis is that there's going to be grief. We want that grief to come from love and sadness, not from despair and consternation and regret and remorse. And I really feel like Bob and I achieved that, because every last thing we really did. There were two very small things that I didn't think to put the utilities in my name. I didn't think to I thought to record the passwords, and I thought I knew all the formulas, but I had not. That's the other takeaway. Write it down, because grief brain is a real thing. And anyway, so I kept the journal. I kept going with it after he died a little bit, but it's mainly about before he died. And then after he died, I do a lot of interim CEOing for large physician practices, and I was doing that for a very large multi-specialty practice. A neurologist I worked with was in the process of diagnosing 3 different patients with ALS, and I brought my journal into him. And he took it home and came back the next day and said, "You're not getting your journal back. I will loan it to these patients, and you better figure out how to get it published." And I did. I found a small independent publisher. And as you said, it's an unusual book. It is 8 by 10, and it is only 85 pages, and it's premium color. It's a picture book, about taking care of someone you love before they die. And I think that's part of how it's been successful in terms of being able to help people, because when you're in that situation, you can't read a chapter book. You just don't have it in you. You are doing everything you can to keep your person comfortable, and there's just, the weight is so heavy that a book that you can flip open and get a gem from and then close, or a book that you can sit down and read cover to cover in a matter of a couple of hours, this is what you need. And so yeah, I think that's been part of its success.
I think so too. Let me just read a couple of things people have said about it, because I think this is so interesting. One person says, although altogether different from the many books which address grief and loss from psychological or philosophical points of view, The Hospice Doctor's Widow is a collage of experiences, documents, tips, and those thoughts many have but few acknowledge. O'Brien's singularly moving and beautiful book maps one woman's journey, illuminating the road that lies ahead for all of us. I thought that was just such a gorgeous, that's Nina Corwin, LCSW, author of The Uncertainty of Maps. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous tribute to this, because I don't know. I love that you started it as a personal thing for you. And I think that's probably why it feels so authentic and so genuine. And then you discovered it was kind of a useful tool for others. Because, I think it's interesting to kind of point out to people who haven't read it yet. It's like you include things like a few emails that went out to extended family, and you include your husband's obituary. And like, these are ways that there are facts in the book. But then there's this very moving moment just a little ways in where you say, today is the first day I took the trash out since my husband's diagnosis. And it's those kind of really little intimate glimpses into how grief impacts us that I was just so struck by.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You start to mark things from, the time at which you got the diagnosis or before or after the person died. That's how life events get marked. And sometimes they're really just the simple, chores um
Yeah, you
that
make a
mark
point
that.
on one page, you say, I have to be really careful so that our situation doesn't get worse because I've been in a car wreck or sliced my hand while cutting, vegetables for a salad. And those kinds of thoughts are so important, right? That to somehow to capture that in this kind of artistic way, I think it's just really quite a gift. And I thought about it, I thought, well, is this something you would give to somebody who's at the beginning of this journey? Or do they want it in the middle? Or is it something you give them afterwards and they go, "Oh, I can relate," right?
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because yes, that has been a big issue. There has become, and talked about the title, because of the title. There are some people who automatically make it a grief book, and that's fine. There are people who have already lost their person who have gotten great benefit from the book. There's no question about it. Um, but one of the hardest things for me to hear from people is when they say, I wish this book had been around when my mother was ill, when my husband was ill. So I want people to get it sooner rather than later. Um, we're all going to die. If we're lucky enough to love someone, they may die before us. And 4 out of 5 of us are going to die following illness, not, sudden death. So it's really got a universality to it. But a lot of people are also really, my favorite is when they say, well, because of the title, if I give her your book, then am I telling her that her husband is dying? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure she knows deep down. But I have, even as the author of the book, I have had that moment of like, is this person ready? And so what I do is I'd rather them have it and not look at it, right? I did my part. I know it. I know this is a useful tool. So I'm just going to give it. I typically will wrap it and say, this is, you know, when you have a minute to yourself, open this up. This is one woman's story, right? This is not prescriptive. This is my story and my journal. It just so happens there's a lot in it that folks in that situation will benefit from. And so be it. And don't ask follow up. That's the when you give a book, especially like this as a gift, we're not looking for a book report. Do not say later, oh, did you read it? No, 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 no. That's a gift. That's not how that works. So, but they'll flip through it. And at some point, and I've gotten one of the wonderful things I've received is when people forward me the thank you notes that they got when they gave it to someone who was in the situation of taking care of a
Yeah.
loved one.
Yeah. I keep flipping pages. That's probably loud for the microphone. One of the pieces that I really liked in it, you've got some wisdom from Bob in it that's so touching. And I love this. I'm going to read this whole page. As a physician working at a world-renowned treatment center, he cares for patients and families from all over the world. Sometimes patients are too sick to make the trip home and have to die in our town. That always breaks his heart. He is glad to be part of a center of excellence, but several times a year he comes home from work saddened. I just can't get this patient home to die, he says. He understands the desire to travel for the best care, but he's always troubled when people push it a little too long or have a complication and have to be away from their community when they die. So there's these gems like that in the book, and you talk about how he was hesitant, even as a hospice doctor, he was sort of hesitant to sign up for hospice, in part because he was very private and everybody knew him. And yet finally you kind of say to him, "Hey, look, I need hospice. I need the backup of hospice sort of standing behind me." And so he's like, "Oh, you're right. This isn't about me. This is also about your experience." And so he does get on hospice, but he's not on super long before he does die.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've brought up, you've raised two really important items there. One, in that travel for care page, um, that's an important one because people will be diagnosed with a terminal illness and they will get on the Google and start finding studies and this and that. And, I'm all for it. Um, but what I'm not for is when they say, yeah, we're gonna fly to wherever, St. Louis or Nashville or LA for this treatment. And this is the classic. They kind of shrug and say, I mean, what do I have to lose? As though it's a sentence, not a question. That is a question. And the answer is, what you have to lose is a comfortable death in your home or community where your loved one who is taking care of you has that family and support and sense of community, you know, at the time of your death. And that is so often in our society of just throw more chemo at it, or you know we need to be deliberate about the end of life. We need to be, and I don't mean, I'm not talking about any of the medical aid in dying, that sort of thing. We don't do that here in Arkansas, and I don't really have a place in that discussion. I'm just talking about being deliberate about a perfectly natural death and discussing where you want that to occur, and who you want in the room and who you don't want in the room. And we were so lucky that we did all that and we talked about that. And I knew exactly what he wanted and was able to make it all happen for him exactly how he wanted it. But I would not have been able to do that if we hadn't thoroughly discussed it.
And if you'd been at MD Anderson or,
And if I
somewhere. Yeah, yeah, it
yes,
just wouldn't have
yes,
been the same. I'm
yes,
struck too in your journey how cognizant both you and Bob were of the differences in your experience. And you talk about that so clearly on a page where you say, "We are having two different experiences." You probably know the quote. Yeah, yeah, here it is. "We are going through two different processes. He is dying and I am surviving." And I feel like you both held that. And talk a little bit about how that impacted some of the decisions you made in those 22 months.
oh yeah, you're right. That's so I'm so glad you asked the question that way. Absolutely. We both, he just was incredibly thorough with planning and preparing every last detail of how my survivorship would go. I mean, every last detail, not micromanaging, detail managing.
Right, right. But
He,
thinking through what would
yes,
matter and what needed to be, as you said, changed over to your name. And you did this huge downsize.
we did. We lived in a huge house. It was beautiful. It was lovely. And he knew, he knew that I moved in there with him, and he knew I would not do well in that house by myself. And so we downsized it, we sold it, and we bought a beautiful condominium, and we were able to live here together for almost 10 months. So that was really wonderful. So I have wonderful memories of being in my condo with Bob. And we went one dreary December day, a couple of months before he died. We went up to the VA Human Resources office. Bob had worked for the VA administration as a physician for many, many years. And as a result, I am eligible for all sorts of wonderful survivor benefits, but they're pretty hard to get. I mean, it's a lot of bureaucracy. He was because he knew everybody and was able to get the appointment scheduled. We went together, and such that everything just fell into place the minute the minute he died, and I had his death certificate and could do that. And so there's just almost not a day that goes by that I don't have a little moment of thanks to him for doing all of that, because my life is just so much smoother because of all that we did together. And we did it together. I mean, he just had some he just knew about some things that I just didn't. We certainly packed up the house and gave away lots of things, and did those kinds of things together. But yeah, it was and what's so wonderful there is that, as I look back on my life with him, and even the end of it, I have no regret. Oh, I wish we'd, and I have no moment of being frustrated with him, right? Because that happens a lot to widows. And worse, being just not assigning the legacy contact on your iPhone, right? So like, I'm in these widows groups, and almost weekly a new widow will come on and say, I don't have the access code to my husband's iPhone, and every time you put in the wrong code, you're that much closer to the whole thing shutting down. There's no way to get the pictures and the videos, and they've become infinitely more important now that he's dead. And it is one of the most heartbreaking things that happen. So if you're listening or watching, you pick up that iPhone and go to settings, and find your legacy contact, and set a couple of them, because people want your photos. And
Yes.
some folks, they change their access code frequently. So you can say, oh, my wife knows or my daughter, or whoever knows my access code, but you may have to change it for some reason. Set the legacy contacts
In the phone. I love
in
that.
the
Well,
phone.
and it's photos, it's also contacts. I mean, I think
Yeah.
who got all those contacts? You towards the end of the book, you make a great list. Let's see if I can put my finger on that. You make a great list. And really it's like, this is what we did. Oh yeah, I love this. Preparations we made that were very helpful to me as the survivor. I thought that was so great. And then there's only two things, as you said, what we didn't do, but I wish we had: put utilities in my name and document passwords to all technology. Those are the only two. So just that list alone is worth, the price of admission for the book. I'm struck though too, like the word that comes to mind when you talk about the way you and Bob went about this is really like thoughtful. Like, it seems like he was thoughtful.
Oh,
And
so thoughtful.
you could have been left to figure this all out by yourself, and you would have, but I think there's so much challenge put on us at the time of grief and loss, that, as you said, you've got grief brain, and then you've got all this bureaucracy to wade through. And as my husband said when his mom died, he said, the thing about a death is there are all these things you have to do that aren't normal everyday things. It isn't the things we're used to doing. It's this whole new skill set. And suddenly you have to do it in the middle of grief. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the layer of grief makes it all that much harder. There's a really great app out now called Empathy. Are you familiar with Empathy?
no, tell us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's a resource. It is it's on your smartphone. You just download it free from the App Store. There is, to get the most benefit out of it, there's a monthly membership charge. But if you're using empathy, not apathy.
I like apathy.
Yeah.
Empathy is where we can go, but let's try empathy.
Let's try empathy. If you're using empathy, you probably only need it for about 6 months, is my guess, because it gives you, prompts as to what to do next. And there are human beings that are available 24/7 who they had one story I know of in particular, because I've talked to the company quite a bit. When I discovered them, of course, I became fascinated. Will help bird dog life insurance checks, because those can be really slow to come. And when you're the person who is bereaved and need that money, right, then it can be that much harder. But someone who will get on the phone with that life insurance company and say, yeah, they were able to get it down from the insurance company had initially said it would be 6 months, and they got it in 6 weeks. So yes,
Wow.
empathy,
So
the
empathy
empathy
for
app is,
services to help people move things along.
yeah, I mean, and some of it also allows you to bring other people, other family members in, so you can delegate, right, tasks. They will help you write an obituary. It's a comprehensive tool that I don't, it wasn't around when Bob died, but
Oh, I'm
luckily,
really happy to
we did
hear it.
our own empathy.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. What a great tool. I talked recently with help texts,
Yes.
HELPTEXTS, which is a little different, but it's the idea of supporting people through grieving or
Grieve.
caregiving.
Yeah, no, that's help text is a wonderful tool.
It's cool. And it sounds like empathy is like a little more on the practical side,
Yeah,
but
all the tasks, all of
well,
the practical tasks. I mean, they are compassionate about grief, but because they know that's what you're going through. But this is really more the practical tasks at hand.
get it done. I think one of the things I want to say to listeners is like, look into these things before you need them. Right? Like if you explore a little bit about what this empathy app is and you check it out, then 2 years from now, when suddenly something happens, you might have that in your back pocket. Because I just think there's so much about this that we wait to do until we're in this fire of grief. And there's something really powerful about it being ahead of time. And that's what I think you and Bob did so beautifully.
I will submit to you that it's some of the greatest intimacy you can achieve in a relationship is to get in there and ask the tough questions and listen to the answers, and then commit to carrying them out for the person you love, regardless of how they line up with what your own wishes for yourself might be. Right? There's this great, just a great act of intimacy and love. And some of our closest moments in our time together came during his illness, as we were preparing. Now, we had thorough discussion in the abstract about what our end of life wishes were. I mean, you can't be married to a palliative care doctor and not at least have that come up, right? So yeah, we both talked about it, and I can strongly recommend that as well. Go ahead and have these conversations. And while I say you can't be married to a palliative care doctor and not have those discussions, I can tell you there are many who have, even palliative care doctors, who have not done it. I mean, the statistics within our field are really no different than the larger population. So practice what you preach, and do it. And I will tell you, you will achieve a closeness with your person that it really can't be beat. It's so good.
I remember a friend of ours, people we knew when we were newly married. Many years later, the woman of the couple ended up getting a really difficult cancer diagnosis and lived for some time, but really it was so severe right from the get go. And I remember her husband saying after she had died, we talked to him maybe several months later, and he said, there was a closeness in that time that there wasn't even a question of, like, there almost was no separation between her and I. He said, I simply did everything I could, everything that she needed all the time. And what I wanted to have be different didn't even matter. It was about
Right.
supporting her. And that there was this level of, I don't know, just like deep care that he had for her that was so incredible to witness.
It is incredible, and it is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done some very, very hard things, and yet the most fulfilling, and you know just the greatest act of love I've ever been able to demonstrate. And so it's both of those things. I will say that the transition from caregiver to griever is a tough one, even under the best of circumstances, which I believe Bob and I achieved was the best of circumstances for me in that transition. And yet it was extraordinarily difficult to have that be your whole raison d'être, and yet then all of a sudden he's gone. And now I will say that knowing what he wanted in terms of disposition and his memorial, that helped a lot for two reasons. Um one was grief brain, back to grief brain, right? Like I knew exactly what he wanted, and some of it had already been prearranged, so I didn't even have to, think. But the other was continuing that role of doing for him, right? I was able to carry that out and demonstrate my love for him beyond his last breath. So that was, and know that I was doing it right, because he had told me what he wanted and I was doing exactly what he wanted.
Well, the communication between the two of you, I think, was extraordinary. And then the ability to say, this is his experience and this is my experience, and they are different, and we need to plan for both.
Yeah.
You just both managed to sort of be in it. You were just in the soup that was handed you. And
Yes.
I think so many of us want to keep hopping out of the soup pot. And you two just really stayed in.
Yeah, no, it's hard to be in it all the time. And that's when that hope for the best and prepare for the worst comes in, and how important it is to just be in tune with the other person. Are they having a really hopeful moment? Well, then let's not bring up that we have to go sign the estate, documents. Let's just enjoy the moment. And we got it done, either both ways.
Yeah, yeah. Say a little bit about your creativity and how that may have kept shifting as you moved from caregiver to griever.
Um, yeah, good question. You know, both were sort of hard. The both were at times dark and difficult. So I I think they come from a similar place. When Bob was still alive, I think I was incorporating a lot more of his wisdom as a palliative care physician. Interestingly, while Bob had dealt with death a lot as a professional, he had not experienced it personally, other than his own parents who lived into their 90s. Um, but that was it. He had not. I was the one who had all the personal experience um, with death of loved ones. Um, so yeah, it was a little different. Honestly, the art as an outlet is, I just can't recommend it enough, because it involves the head and the heart, and you can just work through some serious stuff just by figuring out kind of how to. And for me, I'm not a painter, or I can't draw, so it's all kind of cutting and pasting and just
Collaging, yes.
yeah, yeah, just
I
bringing it all together.
I know one friend who, in her personal cancer journey, she ended up making a thick, thick journal that was just what a exquisite piece. I think it was just blank pages, but I mean, some of them were her rage and some of them were her joy, and it was just this incredible kind of companion for her through her chemo and radiation and so on. And she recommended that really highly as a way to keep going. And I love that you have that. It sounds like you've had that in your life your whole life.
No, no, I haven't. But but I did figure it out shortly after my mother died. Actually, is when I started to discover collaging and so forth. I do. If you visit my website on the resources page, there is a free download of 5 art journaling prompts.
Oh,
So
neat. Oh,
yeah,
fantastic.
because I really believe in the art. I mean, you just don't have to be an artist to art journal. You really don't.
I
Um,
love that. Let's go ahead and say that. What's the website where people can find that?
Yeah, the website is Hospice Doctor's Widow, and you can either spell out the word doctor or DRS, hospicedoctorswidow.com. And the resources page is where you'll be able to download the art journaling prompts. And I have a number of really valuable, I think they're valuable, free downloads on that resource page. I have a I have a position description for a family caregiver. As someone who has been in leadership in healthcare for a long time, I started to think about, what if I had to hire for this position, right? What would be in the position description? And it is very thorough, and I think it serves well both the caregiver to have an idea of what it is they're called upon to do, to have an idea if it's getting to be time to go back into the workforce and be able to describe what you've been doing. It's been a real eye opener to healthcare professionals to see what it is we're calling on family caregivers to do, because it would not survive, a collective bargaining agreement. It just wouldn't. And then the other download that I have there is called the At Peace Toolkit, and it's a step by step how to get yourself ready for end of life and get some discussions started. So
Wow, you have been busy, and I just love how you brought all this together. And for those who aren't looking, I'll show the at peace. I love that. You've even got like an at peace jewelry piece, which I think is so neat. Have a
I
nice.
do. The ad piece really took off. It was the youngsters dig the symbol. I've got some swag and merch on with the at peace symbol. It was about being at peace with end of life, but people have sort of extrapolated and just like the idea of being at peace. So
It's
yeah,
great.
it's a neat symbol.
I think it's just another expression of your creativity. And I also feel like it's worth, well, let's say where people can find the book and talk a little. I mean, this book has won some beautiful awards.
Yes.
In the category of death, dying, and grief, a Nautilus Book Award, Indie Book Award, Independent Publisher Book Award. I mean, it's really making the rounds. And how can people buy the book?
Well, listen, I want you to buy the book in whatever way is easiest for you, which means you can find it through my website and go directly to the publisher. You can go to Amazon, you can go to barnesandnoble.com, you could go to your local bookstore and have them order it for you. There's a indie book, network that is linked on my website also. It is available in all major outlets and minor ones too. And if you order from the publisher, you'll get a signed copy. So that's kind of fun. And I sign them on the last page of the book. But yeah, I've been like I said, I don't care how you get the book. Just please give it a try, because it will help you and it will help someone you love. I promise you. I promise you that. Yeah. Yeah. And it was luck. I did submit it through several of the book award systems, and it won in every system that I submitted it to. And the beautiful thing was it won in different categories, which I love. But I guess what I love the most is that it's helping people. That's really the award.
That is really the award. Well, they are people I plan to give it to. I just think it's such a neat way to come into a conversation about the end of life, death, grief, survivorship in a way that's not too overwhelming. It's not preachy. It's not a self-help book. It's just, as it says, one woman's journey and kind of a map with some signposts that I think people will find really helpful.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful page in it where you say that there's a poem that you and your husband Bob used to read to each other. And let's just read a tiny bit of it. Do you want to introduce that, Jennifer?
Sure. It's called The Desiderata, and it's by Max Ehrman, and it was written in 1927. Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons, speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. And as you said, it's quite long. It's worth it. Go find it and download it. And Bob and I used to have it in the bathroom and read it in the morning before getting ready to go to work. And now have it in my bathroom. And I'm not sure I go through it line by line every single day, but it sure helps center me and focus me on what's really, good and right in life. So,
I
and
love
it's non-denominational for the most part. I
that.
mean, there
Yeah.
is a reference to God in it, but it says, "Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive Him to be." And so, yeah, it's lovely.
Keep going.
I
Read
highly recommend.
read those last couple sentences from there because I love that part too.
Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive Him to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful, strive to be happy.
Thank you so much to Jennifer O'Brien and her wonderful book, The Hospice Doctor's Widow, a Journal. Thanks for joining me today, Jennifer. And you've said your website, hospicedoctorswidow.com. You can find out about her book and some free downloads there. And you can find out about the work I do at bestlifebestdeath.com. Thanks for joining us today. I think this is really a unique book, and I hope lots of people kind of pick it up.
Thank you, Diane. I really appreciate that.
Great. Have a great day.
Bye.